webinar? Yes. So to start with, here I assume that you have little bit understanding of AngularJS, because today we are not going to cover basic of AngularJS, and directly I will jump to the custom directives part. Uh, Probably we will see that how time proceed, and today we are going to focus mainly on scopes and and the link function in the custom directive. Well, my name is Dhananjay Kumar and I am presenter for today. I am a 6 times Microsoft MVP and I am an Infragistics consultant. You can find me on Twitter, which is debug_mode. Great, guys. So the agenda for today webinar is very simple. We are going to talk about directives. We will focus on shared scope, inherited scope, isolated scope, and link function. We do have demo and we are going to write code for each one of these concepts. Great. So to start with, what is directives, right? Guys, can you confirm me that whether you are able to hear me clearly or not? I see many people are typing the message that my voice is not audible to them. So if you just let me know that if majority of you are able to hear me or not. Just use Q&A panel to let me know that whether my voice is audible or not. Perfect. Great. So guys, before I start getting into directives, as you see, let us start with writing a very simple AngularJS application. So what I have done here, just give me a moment. What I have done here is that uh, I'm going to use Visual Studio. However, you can use any IDE of your choice. Okay, so here you see that what I have done in Visual Studio, I added a reference of AngularJS and reference of Bootstrap. You don't need Bootstrap to work with AngularJS. It's just that I am going to use some of the Bootstrap classes. That is why I have added reference of Bootstrap and AngularJS. So you see that in line number 5 and line number 6, I have references of Bootstrap CSS and Angular.js, and then index.js is my code behind. Great. So to start with, what I'm going to do, I'm going to write something here. Let us say I'm going and I'm creating a div, and in that div, I'm saying class container, and in this, I'm just putting expression 7 plus 8, and what I'm going to do, I'm saying that hey, this is not a normal AngularJS normal document object model. It is something else. But before let us go ahead and run this application. And when I run this app, okay, so the expected output is obvious that we are going to get here 7 plus 8, as you see on your screen, right? Great. Now if I go ahead and put ng app on my HTML document, what I'm doing here, I have attributed in line number 2 that HTML element with ng app. And now when I go ahead and run the same application here, you see that I will get this expression as 15. Okay, so what is happening here is that what is happening over here, that by putting that ng app, what I have done, I have given a special meaning to this document. ng app is nothing but a directive. Okay, let us go ahead and let me go ahead and show you something more. I'll go here and say that hey, I have div, and then I'll say ng show as false. Okay, and inside this I'm putting some message, hello, and then I have one more div over here, right, and I'll put this div as true. Now if I go ahead and run this application again, You see that I am in my application for this particular view, this particular div, which is in line number 12 to line number 13. This is not getting displayed when we are rendering the page. However, this is getting displayed. What message I am trying to convey you here is that ng app, which you are using over here, ng show, which you are using here, all these are nothing but a directive in AngularJS. What directive does, it gives a special meaning to HTML element. For example, when we use ng app with HTML element, we actually converted the whole document, the HTML document, to an Angular application. When we are using ng show directive, what actually we are doing, we are giving we are manipulating that particular DOM element, that whether that particular DOM element should be displayed or should not be displayed. If you have done any Angular coding, and if you might have used ng repeat, what ng repeat does, it creates new element for you, right? So there are many many built-in directives given to you by Angular team, which you can use as it is. For example, ng app, ng show, you might have used ng controller, right? So ng controller is another directive. So all these are directives, just to give you an introduction. Okay, so let me go ahead here and try to understand what are the directives. As you see on your screen right now, uh, what is directive in AngularJS? So it attaches a specified behavior to existing DOM element or create a new element, right? So as you see, when we use ng app directive or other directives, what happens that those directives gives a special meaning. It attaches a specified behavior to the existing DOM element. Second definition is directives can modify the behavior of a particular DOM element or add new custom element on the DOM. So when you use ng show, actually what you are doing, you are changing the behavior of that particular DOM element. That DOM element is not getting displayed. When you are using ng repeat directive, what you are doing, you are repeating you are creating new elements in the loop. Then other things is that directive name must be provided in the camel case. I will explain you when I show you how to create a custom directive, that always your directive name should be in the camel case. When I say camel case, your first character should be small, and then all the adjacent characters should start with the capital letter. On the view, directive can be used by separating the camel case name either using dash, colon, or underscore. Let us skip this point. I'm going to show you how we will use that. Okay, but to understand what is directive, keep in mind that directives are a JavaScript function in AngularJS which either creates new element or gives a new meaning to your existing DOM element, right? So actually you can say that if that what are the tasks a directive does. If I come here and show you that what are the task a directive does. So here you see on your screen that we can say that these are the tasks actually performed. Oh, just a minute. Yeah, these are the tasks actually being performed by the directives. A directive can manipulate the DOM. A directive can iterate through the data. So when I say manipulate the DOM, when you use ng show, ng hide, those kind of directives, it iterate through the data, means ng repeat. It handles event when you use ng click, etc. directives. It can modify the CSS. It validate the data, and it does the data binding using ng bind, etc. So these are the tasks which is done by the directives. Great. And as we talked that mainly directives, what they do, they either gives a special meaning to existing DOM element, or what they do, they create a new DOM element, or they modify the behavior of the either they give a special meaning to the existing element, or they create a new element, or they manipulate the DOM element. These are the work which is done by the directives. So I assume that now you are clear with what is the purpose of directives directive, it creates new element, it manipulates the DOM, or it gives a special meaning to existing element. Yeah, if you have written even a hello world AngularJS application, whether you know it or don't know it, you have already used the directives like ng app, ng controller, ng repeat, and all those directives. So this is just for the theoretical part I had. Now I'm going to show you in today that how you can work with custom directives, how you can create your own directives, right? So that is the purpose of today's webinar, and we will be focusing mainly on the scopes in directives. Great. But before I move ahead, let me quickly go and create application. So I'll come here. So this is my code behind. What I'm going to do, I'm going to references and such that my I want my IntelliSense to work. I'll go to scripts and then to AngularJS. I drag and drop it over here. Then I'll say var. Let us say I'm calling it my app. Okay. So how you can create an app? You can say Angular dot module, right? And then here you can give name of the app and any dependency if you have for this particular module. Then you can create a controller like this, my app dot controller. Controller are the Angular function which is used to pass data and behavior to the view. So each controller has a scope object which is used to pass data and behavior to the view and get the data and behavior from the view to the controller. So what you do, you create a controller like this. Always you give the controller name like this, like a start with capital and then append with controller, and then you say function, right? In this function you actually pass a scope object, right? And in this scope object, what you can do, you can say that a scope dot for example name, and here you can say bat or something. Now if you want to use this particular scope controller on your Angular application, what you can do, here's that you can go here and say div, okay, and then we can create one more div with ng controller, and here we can say that we want to work with product controller, so we'll put that controller name here. Guys, so you see that we are using ng controller directive over here, okay, and then if you want to use that name inside this, you can very much take that name here. So it will be rendered in line number 12, and here you need to say ng app is equal to my app, which is the name of your module. So here we have created the boilerplate of our application, which is very simple. We have a module here, we have a very simple controller here, then we attach that module here in the my app, and then we are using that controller in one of the div and rendering that value. So if we go ahead and run the application now, you see I'm getting the output bat over here, which is very expected and pretty simple. Now I'm going to show you that how you can create your own directive. So to create your own directive, what you need to do, you need to have a module. Once you have the module, here I'm going to create in the same module, you go and say my app dot directive. So my app dot directive, and here you need to give name of the directive. Okay, I hope, let me just confirm my voice is clear or not.
Yes, it's perfect.
Okay, so here now see, now let us go back to our presentation again, and which I told you that you can skip that slide. In our presentation, you see the third from the top, in the top row, the third point on your screen. What we are saying there is that directive name must be provided in the camel case. So whenever you create your own directive, the directive name must be provided in the camel case. So here I get a message that I am too fast. Okay, uh, let me try to go slow. So when you create a custom directive, step one, your directive name must be in the camel case, which is the third point written on your slide, which you might be seeing on your screen. Next, so first let us go ahead and create a directive by giving a camel case name. So here let me come, okay, and we can give a name here in the camel case like this, my first directive. You see, it has started. It starts with lowercase, and then we are appending all the words in capitals. So this is the camel case. Okay, that is your directive name. Then what you can say that next should be the function. So here we are passing the function. Okay. Great. Now this takes too many parameters, but this function returns an object. We call it directive definition object (DDO), which will have parameters. So I'll say return. Okay. Now here, one of the most important and the simplest parameter is template. Here you can say template div hello my first directive. So this is the directive, let us say you want to create. Okay, so what I have done here in line number 11 to line number 15, I created the simplest custom directive possible. What I am saying, to create that in the module, I am using my app module, then directive, then passing the directive name, which must be in the camel case. I repeat, which must be in the camel case. Then a function which returns, further in the webinar we are going to see that it returns many things, but it should return at least one parameter, that is template. So this is a JavaScript object which returns from the directive function with the property template. In the template we have a normal HTML hello my first directive. Now I can use this directive on my view like this. I'll go here, I'll use this, I'll create one more div. Okay, so again let me go back to my PPT. Okay, let us wait. Here how we can use our directive name is my first directive. Take that here. Okay, my first directive. No, if it is not in the camel case, it will not work. Okay, now I need to separate all the character of camel case either using dash or using colon. Okay, so I'll use my first directive. You see what I'm doing? I'm separating the character of camel case using the dash. Okay, or you can separate them using colon also, or you can separate them using underscore also. So you have three options. Either you can separate them as that using dash, or you can separate them using colon, or you can separate them using underscore. Great. Now if I go ahead and run the application, what I have done, I created a directive over here, and then I'm using the directive directive over here in line number 15. Then I'll go ahead and run. Here you see that I'm getting hello my first directive. Okay, so here I go. Of course I can go here and say that I want to use combination of colon and underscore. I want to use so you can use either even combination of underscore, colon and dash. As you see right now I'm using a combination of underscore, dash and the colon. Now if I go and run, still I should able to get the expected output. So here you see that I created a directive which is actually creating a new element. That new element is my first directive. Now if I go ahead and right click and say view page source, select this particular element and say inspect element, you see that element is getting rendered here like this. Can you see that there is a new element got created called my first directive? And that element has this div and whatever element we have put inside that. Now again, you may not want at your client side to go this my first directive, the name of your custom directive. You can very much avoid that also, and you can avoid that using, there's something called uh, let us go here and say replace, set the replace value to true. If you set a replace value to true and then again come back and here you say that you want to use the custom directive like this. Now if I go ahead and run the application again, I'm getting hello my first directive, and if I inspect that element, you see now my client is not at a client side. This the newly custom directive name, that my first directive, is not visible, and I hide that by setting the parameter here replace as true. Great. So this is how you can create a very simple custom directive. Again, let us go back to slide and try to understand what we have done. So here you can see in the slide a directive name must be provided in the camel case. On the view directive can be used by separating the camel case name either using dash, colon, or underscore. Okay, then combination of dash, underscore, or colon can also be used. We just saw that. And the last example is that if directive name is my first directive, then on the view, it can be used either as my dash first dash directive, or my colon first colon directive, or my underscore first underscore directive, or my underscore first dash directive. Means combination of those three. I hope I am going slow, not very fast, and you are able to catch up with me. If still we are fast, you can use Q&A panel to let me know that whether we are that do I need to go slower. So this is how you can create a very simple your first custom directive. Now we'll proceed later. Okay. Now directives in AngularJS, there are many built-in now there are many built-in directives available which we just saw, right? Like ng show, ng controller, ng app, etc. And we have seen this demo. Now we are going to that second demo of our webinar. Always remember that you can create a custom directive. You can use a custom directive in 4 possible ways. You can see that on your screen. You can use a custom directive either as an element, which we just saw in our example, that we were creating a new element, right? So we can create we can create a custom directive. We can use a custom directive either as an element. We can use a custom directive either as an attribute. We can use a custom directive either as a comment, or we can use a custom directive either as a class. Okay, so when you create a custom directive, it is purely your decision that how you want your user to use your custom directive. You can restrict them by setting the restrict value. If you want that your custom directives should only be used as an attribute, you can set value of restrict property to A. If you want your custom directive should only be used using as an element, then your custom you need to set the restrict value to E. So here I'll go and I'll say restrict as E. So if I set set restrict value to E, it means while creating this custom directive, what I am saying in line number 14, that this particular custom directive cannot be used as an attribute or as a comment or in other possible ways. It can only be used as an element. If you set this value to E and A, let us say, so what actually you are saying that we can use this custom directive either as an element or as an attribute. Make sense, guys? So we can restrict a custom directive uses in the combination as well by putting both values. So if you set restrict equal to EA, it means actually you are saying that I want to use this custom directive as an element and as an attribute both. Great. So this is so far we have seen the attributes template, we have seen attribute replace, we have seen attribute restrict, and all are very important when you create your own custom directive. Okay, so let us proceed further. Okay, now what we are going to do, result will be same. I mean, we have not changed anything, right? Result should be exactly same because we are saying that restrict it as an E and A. If I go and remove this E, and now what I'm saying that I want to use this custom directive only as an attribute, but however on the view I am using it as an element. Right now, if I go and run my application, you see on the view we are using it only as an element. Now I go and run this application, you see, and now I'm not able to get the output that my first directive is not working here. It's not working. The reason behind that is in the custom directive we are saying that use this only as an attribute. However, on the view we are using it as an element. Now I hope you got the purpose. Okay. So here I'll go and make it again E. Now let us see that how we can create more custom, more complex directive. Okay. Right now you see that in the template we have only like in the template. I mean, if we set the template value, this is just a string. You may want to have your template somewhere else in in other file. How you can do that? We can go here, okay, and we can say that add a new HTML page. I'm adding a new HTML here, and let me call this as let us say product template. Okay, so what I'm doing, I'm adding HTML in my project and I'm calling it as product template. So this is a product template.html, and what I am going to do, I have this div here. I'll take this div from here, okay, and I'll put it inside the product template. Okay, so you see that I have kept now my template in a separate file, which is for better modularity. And here I can go and say div class as panel, and I can set other values here. Panel, let us say primary. Okay, so this is the panel here, and now what I can do to use this product template.html, instead of template, what you need to use, we need to use template URL, and here we can say that I want to use product template.html. So you see now it will read the template from a separate HTML file. Now if we go ahead and run the application again, you see we are getting the hello my first directive, and which is getting loaded from product template.html. Just to make it better, what I'm going to do, I'll be saying that I don't want jumped on this particular class here, such that we can view the. Okay, so this is how your panel works. Great. Now let us see that how we can pass data to the directive. So to pass the data to the directive, what we can do, guys, let me go ahead here and create a template. What I'm doing here, I'm creating a template here, product template. The product template is something like this. Product template has something called a student. So I'll call it as, let us say, product one dot name, and then I'll call it as product one dot price. Okay, or let us work with a student only. Okay, so we have a student dot name, and then we have a student dot age. Then we are saying that if a student dot subject exists, then what you do in the using the ng repeat, show all the subjects. So this is my template. Next, what I'm going to do, guys, I'm going to here in index.js we have this controller. I'm going to create a new controller, and I'll call that controller as a student's controller, for example. So I have a new controller here. Okay, this is a student's controller. I have to keep it as the capital. Okay, so this is a student's controller we have, which has a student object with name is subject, and then there is a scope.setGrade function. Great. So this is a controller I have. Now we want to pass this data, okay, to this template using the directive which we have created over here. Okay, now how we can do that? To do that, let us go ahead first and say ng controller equal to, we have created a new controller called a student's controller. So we'll take this guy from here, or call it a student controller. We'll take this controller from here, and index.html will put it here. So what we are doing, we are now setting the ng controller for this div as a student controller, and then using the directive inside that particular screen. Okay, and here is the template. Here we are saying that a student.name is student.age, then the subject and all that we are displaying. Okay, and then what I'm saying, my first directive, this is set to the template URL product template.html. Great. So now if I go and run this application, screen is not visible. Just give me a moment. Is it visible now, my screen and voice both? Is it okay, guys? Okay. Okay. So here you see, again, I repeat what I have done, guys. Let us assume that now you have a controller, which is here, line number 10 to line number 24. Guys, this is the controller. That controller name is a student controller. Okay. And that got an object called a student. We need to pass this, we need to use this particular data, this particular object in our directive. Okay, that is the requirement. So what I'm doing here is that I have this controller. Okay, then I have created a directive. Directive has a template URL set to product template.html, and in the product template.html I'm simply displaying that a student.name, a student.age, which is I'm taking from here, name, age, etc. Okay, now to pass that data, what I need to do, only I need to use this particular directive inside a div which ng controller is set to the controller, to the student controller, from where we want to read the data. Very simple, right? Now if I go ahead and run my application again, here you see that we are able to read the data from the controller in the directive. You see, here you have DJ, name, age, then the subjects, okay, which is coming from DJ, age, subject. Great. So this is the way you can pass data from controller to directive. What I have done, I'm just using the directive inside the div which ng controller is set to the controller name. Now this way of passing data is known as shared scope. What I mean by that, that whatever data is here, okay, in your controller is directly getting passed to your directive over here. Okay, so the problem with this approach is, if you go ahead and repeat this again, directive, what will happen, you cannot pass distinct data. The same data will be repeat because it is reading the data from the student controller directly, and you are not setting the directive the data for your directive explicitly. So now if you run ahead and see the application, you see you are getting the same data over here. Okay, great. Now let me go ahead and do one thing, now in the directive also you can have a controller. Okay, so I have this restrict E. I can go here and say controller is a function. Your directive can contain controller, takes a scope, Okay. Now in the directive controller, let us say you are saying a scope dot set grade, which takes a function and then takes a student parameter. Okay. And then you can say a student dot grade equal to, let us say we are setting it to B plus. Okay. So what we are doing in the directive, we added a controller that has a behavior called set grade, and we are setting the student grade to the B plus. Okay. Next, what we are going to do uh, in our template, what we are going to do now, that we are going to have one more div. And what we are saying in this div, that if a student grade does not exist, then show a button, and when user click on that button, call the setGrade function. So this setGrade function will be called from here. Make sense, guys? Now if I go and run here again my application, you see I have a button set grade. When I click here, you see it is setting, I mean it will set the value for your for each student. So I'm clicking only one button. Can you notice that? But it is getting impacted on all the instance of my directives, and this is happening because data is in the shared scope. Okay. Now to understand the shared scope better, let us first try to understand how the isolated scope works. Okay, how you can pass how you can pass distinct data. Great, but here let me go ahead and do one more thing. So if we go ahead in the controller again, and before that, let us put this div. Now if you run it, you see you have set grade. When I'm setting the grade is setting to be positive, but you are getting the message, right? I'm working on a particular, this is the custom directive 1, this is 2, this is 3, but I'm clicking one of them and all are getting impacted due to the shared scope, because the scope of your data and the scope of your controller and scope of your directive is same. To understand it better, see, you click it, everyone is getting clicked. To understand it better, let us go ahead here in the scope of your controller and say console.log, and here if you print the console in the console scope value, and then again print the scope value probably over here uh, in your controller. See what I'm doing, I'm just printing the value of a scope inside the directive controller and also inside the controller student controller. Now if I go and run it again, okay, and if I press F12 uh, and go to console, you see I have the ID of the scopes same. Can you see here for line number 11 and line number 2, for line number 11 and line number 33, ID is the same. It is the same ID 3 for the both the scopes. So to understand it better, let us go ahead and for now remove these two directives. Now again if I go and run this, you see here the ID of the scope of controller is 3 and ID of the scope of your directive is 3. It means both are sharing the same scope. So if you change something in the directive, that will get impacted to controller, and if you change something in the controller, that would get impacted to directive. This is how shared scope works. Okay, so try to understand here. What we are trying to do here is that let me explain it again. Let us go step by step. Okay, this is your controller. This is your controller. Okay, controller means this is your data. I have a data here, and as you know that in AngularJS, each controller has its own scope, right? So here you see that I have the scope. I'm printing that value here. Okay, and I have this data. I need to pass this particular data. I need to pass this particular data to my directive. Simple. Here is my directive. In directive also has a controller, also has a scope, and I'm printing that scope value here. Okay, now what I'm doing here, that inside my directive controller I have a set grade function. This is just to show you that you can have a function in the directive controller as well. It does not matter whether whether you put this particular function here or you put this function in the student controller. It will work exactly in the same way. I'm just trying to show you that if you want, you can have some behavior in the controller of directive as well. That is why we have set it there. Okay, just try to understand two things here, that you have a scope for this controller. Great. Line number 32 to line number 38. You have a scope for that controller, which is part of the directive. Step 1. Step 2, you have a scope for a student controller, line number 10, line number 11. Now this student controller works as the data source for the my first directive. How it is working? If I go here, what I'm doing, I'm using this my first directive inside the div, which ng controller property is attached to a student controller. I'm on line number index.html. I'm talking about line number 14. I have set ng controller equal to a student controller, and then using in line number 15 the directive. It means the scope of this controller, a student controller, will be shared with the scope of my first directive controller. And that is why in my first directive, you are able to access properties of a student controller, which we are accessing over here. This is normal HTML. I don't think I need to explain anything here. It is just normal HTML where we are showing the name, age, we are displaying subject, and when we are clicking this button, we are calling the directive controller set grade function and setting the grade value. Now if I go ahead and run it again here, okay, now just to show you, just to give you the proof that both are using the same scope. Here if I come here and show you, so you see that the scope of your controller has the ID 3. At the same time, a scope of your directive controller has the ID 3. It means both are working on the same scope. Means you change at one place will be reflected to the other place. This is how it works. Okay, this is how it works. This is how shared scope works. To understand it better, let me first go ahead and quickly show you isolated scope. Okay, guys. So what I can do here, assume that okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create one more. So I already have the product controller. Okay, guys. I have a product controller here. Quickly, what I'm going to do in the product controller, I'm going to put some properties, some product. Okay, so in the product controller, you see this is a normal product controller. In this, I have a product 1 with name, price, stock, product 2 with the name, price, stock, product 3 with the name, price, stock, and then there is a function show data is alert display data. Okay, any question on the product controller? I'll go very step by step here because this is very important. We are trying to understand isolated scope. Okay. So this is the product controller. This is the data source we are going to use in our directive. Any question on controller, guys? Please use your Q&A panel to ask the question if you have any. Then I'll proceed further. Any question on product controller? Okay, so Gaurav is asking very good question, right? Gaurav, that is what I am explaining you. When you have working in the shared scope, Gaurav, actually you are redefining the same function, right? You have the set grade function in your student controller, you have set grade function in your directive controller. Since both are in shared scope, what happened? You have given new definition to the set grade function. That is the purpose of that demo. So the set grade function of student controller gone. It's not into the existence for that particular function. This is how JavaScript works, right? Prototype based inheritance. I hope I answered your question. Okay. Great, but please focus here. In isolated scope, you'll understand that what is the difference. Okay, guys. So what I have done here, that I have a product controller. Okay, let me go ahead here and in the let us leave this my first directive and create a new directive. Okay, so this is my controller. Now I'll go ahead and create a new directive, and I'm calling that directive as my app directive called inventory product. Okay, guys, which is having restrict e, means I want to use that as element. Okay, then you see that I'm setting a scope property over here. Can you see that? A scope property is set to curly braces, and then we have a template. In template, what we are saying that div cost this name, price, button, and all that. Okay. Now, if you want to pass this data, how we can pass data over here? Okay. Let me first go here, div, and then call, let us say, product1.name, product1.price. Okay, and then we'll say, okay, so this is how it is, the inventory product. Now what I'm going to do, for example, I'm not setting this scope value, or let me set this scope value to false. Okay, scope value equal to false means it is in the shared scope. Okay, scope value equal to false means it is in the shared scope. Now I'll go here in the inventory product. I need to use that, so I'll go here, I'll create a new div. Okay, I'll use that I'll use that inventory product uh, from index.js. Okay, now what I'm going to do, I'm going to set the value of the controller, which is the value of the controller is product controller. So I'll take this guy from here and say ng controller equal to product controller. Okay, let me just comment this. For example, we don't want to use that, so I will just go here and take this whole and comment it. Okay, and then let us say we comment this also. Great. Now we have only one div with ng controller set to product controller. Okay, in the inventory product, what we are doing here, we are in the product controller, we have product 1, product 2, and all that. And then what we are doing here is that we created an inventory product, restrict e, scope false, and then the template we are displaying product 1 and product 1 name and product 1 price, which should go from here, product 1. So when we run this application, now we are expecting phone and 100 should be displayed. So now if we go ahead and run this application again, here you see that we are getting the data phone cost 100 and there is a change name button over there. Okay, very good. What's happening here is that we are not passing the data separately. Okay, because the scope is false means it is in the shared scope. But now there's a challenge. Here we are hard coding product 1 dot price. We are hard coding product 1 dot name. What if we want to pass product 2 or product 3? How we can pass that data? That is the challenge, right? For that, we have to use something called isolated scope. To work with isolated scope, set the scope value to braces. When you set a scope value to braces, now if you go and run this, you see now you are not getting the data. Means we have created the directive in the isolated scope. Okay, since it is in the isolated scope, by setting this scope value to curly braces, data is not getting passed from product controller to inventory product. So isolated scope isolates your directive from the controller in which you are working with that. Now let me go back to first presentation again, and then I'll come back to demo here. Okay, so scopes in the directives, try to understand. Then again, I'll come back to demo that you have shared scope, inherited scope, and isolated scope. In shared scope, directives share scope with the enclosed controller, and it is a default scope. Inherited scope is not that important, but directive inherit scope of the enclosed controller. Isolated scope is very important. In this, directive and controller has different scope and data is not shared. We just saw the example, right? When I set value of a scope equal to curly braces, data is not getting shared. I'm coming to the advantage of isolated scope, Sapna. We are going to do the demo on that, okay? Just try to understand the theoretical part now. So data is not shared, means we can pass data explicitly to my directive. My directive can be reused, okay? So here you see in the scopes in directive, if you have a controller, as you see on your screen, as you see on your screen that in shared scope, what happens that your controller a student object in directive scope.student data is shared. However, if you are in the isolated scope, in directive scope.student data is not shared. Okay? So when we go further, how to now pass data? Here you see here you can see that in the isolated scope data is not shared. Then how we can pass data actually? So we can pass data in isolated scope in three different ways. We can pass data either as a string, we can pass data either as an object, or we can pass data. We can pass a function as a data. So when we pass data as a string value, that is the one-way binding. When we pass data as an object, that is two-way binding, and the function is the external function binding. So let me first show you that how you can pass data as a string. If you want to pass data as a string, you need to use iterate. If you want to pass data as an object, you need to use equal to. If you want to pass data as an ampersand, as a function, you want to call external function, you need to use ampersand. Okay, so here I'll go to my directive, and in the directive I'll say so this is the inherited scope. This is your inherited scope. Now I'll say that I want to pass two string to this, and that can be passed as name. And when you set this name is the name of the variable, and when you set this to ampersand, so actually in line number 66 what you are saying, that hey, this name will take a string value. Make sense, guys? In the same way, I can come here and say price, and then again I'll say this price will take a string value, and then here I'll say that I want to use the name, okay, and I want to use the price. Make sense, guys? So here, okay, so what happening here is that user will pass name value for the name and price as a string. Remember, string is one-way parameter. Okay, it's the one-way binding, and then we are using that name and price in the template of my directive. Now on my index.html, even if now I go and run this, now nothing will happen because we are not passing value for name and the price. However, I can pass that here as name equal to, we need to pass that as a string, right? So we can pass that as name equal to, we can say product1.name, right? So this expression will get evaluated to a string and then get assigned that value to name. Then we can set price equal to, let us say we want to pass price of product 2. So we'll say product2 dot price. You see, now we are passing the value explicitly. I can pass anything here, right? Product2 dot price, right? I'll go here and now run. I am expecting the output. I'm expecting the output product1 name. So I'm expecting the output as phone, okay, and the price 1000, right? So for the product 2. Now if we go ahead and run this, both are getting passed as an object. You see, phone cost 1000 rupees. Okay, making sense? I can very much go here and instead of this value, I can pass whatever I want as in string. I can pass Infragistics. Okay, so if I go ahead and run it again, you see that here the value has been changed to Infragistics. It means actually what's happening, that we are able to pass a string value explicitly to my directive. That is the advantage of shared scope. Okay, your directive is not accessing the data from your controller. Your directive is not accessing the data from your controller, and you can pass it explicitly. Make sense, guys? So here now you see that I have a button called in my template. I have what I'm doing that in my, I have a button where what I'm saying that change the name to bat, right? Okay, so what I'm going to do here is that name, let me make this as h2 and h2. So if I go ahead and run it again, okay, so its Infragistic cost $1,000, and when I do change name, okay, it is changing to bat, which we are changing on the click event here. Okay, now let me show you something very important. Okay, guys, so here I'll be back to, for example, the same Infragistic, same this product1 dot name. Okay, now I am reusing this particular directive here 3 times. Okay, now if I go and run the application again, you see that it is changing only value of the one, it is only changing the value of the directive controller or directive name value. It is not doing anything with other values from the data controller which is coming to your directive, because this is in the shared scope, and when you pass a string, it is actually one-way communication. Like your directive can change only the value of its own scope. It cannot change value of the parent controller scope. So this is way how your app person works. So just to summarize, you can pass the data as a string using the name app person and price app person. Okay, now let us say you want to pass an object. Object gets passed as a two in a two-way binding way, and object can be passed using the equal to operator. So here you give equal to, and here you can say that name and data. Okay, so you can give any variable name. Data is a variable name, so I'll say data. Okay, and here it would be data dot name, then data dot price. Okay, and then we'll say button class, change the data dot name to, let us say, ij. Now we can pass an object to this inventory product, and which can be passed here. Right now you see that we are passing this string. We can get rid of this, and we'll say data equal to, data equal to product1, because product1 is an object here, right, in the controller. So it will be the name, price, and all will be passed. In the same way, we can pass different products. Here we can say data equal to product2, and then we can pass data equal to product3. So this is the advantage of isolated scope. You can pass explicit object as the value. Now if I go ahead and run the application again, you see I have 3 different value over here: phone, TV, and laptop. But remember that now when I click on this particular scope object, what would happen is guys, just give me a moment. Okay, guys, can you confirm me whether my voice is audible or not? So we just saw that how we can pass how we can work with the shared scope, how we can work with the isolated scope. In isolated scope, you can the major advantage of isolated scope that you can pass the explicit value as a value for the data of your custom directives, right? You can, if you want to pass a string, use ampersand. If you want to pass an object, use equal to. What I'm going to say now is very important, guys. I see people are very confused in that. When you pass a string in custom directive in isolated scope, that is actually one-way binding. So if you change anything in the directive, controller will not be impacted. However, when you pass an object using the equal to, that is actually two-way binding. So if you change something in your directive for that particular object, what would happen that your controller will also get impacted. So if I go ahead here, right now, and if I click on one of these change name, if okay, you see it will change the value of my controller in the I mean controller scope also. So just to understand it, what I'm going to do, I'm going to pass product one again here. Okay, and now if I go and run this, you see I have phone cost $100 and phone cost 100. When I change name, you see both of these are getting changed because it is the two-way binding. It is changing the name for both the products. It is actually passed by reference. Okay, guys. So this is how work with shared scope. If you want to pass a function, to pass a function, you need to use here in your directive ampersand. Okay, and you can call a function outside. Great. So this is all about the scopes. We are running out of time. We can do one more session on directives in which we will talk about link functions. So guys, before I go ahead and jump to question and answer panel, uh, let me just summarize that what we just did. We've covered today. We covered directives, shared scope, inherited scope. Okay, inherited scope is very simple. You just, if you want to override some of the value of the controller, that is inherited scope, controller scope, and the link function is completely untouched, which probably we may do, next week. If we do we may cover that that particular section, which is again very important. Uh, Once again, guys, thank you so much for attending today's webinar. We are 10 minutes late. As you know that this webinar is brought to you by Infragistics, mainly keeping developers from the Indian time zone in the mind. And you can download our product for free for 30 days from infragistics.com/product/, slash ultimate slash download. Okay, if you have any query, any question, you can send that to sales-india@infragistics.com. And if you want to see webinar on a particular topic, you can send that also us on the email. I will on that particular email address. So this is for the today webinar. Now I'm going to cover now we are going to cover again what we have covered today, like going to revise them again. And just to tell you that the webinar recording will be available to you to download and to watch on our Infragistic blog, and probably that will be up by Tuesday or Monday. So like whenever we do webinar, like last time we did the webinar on JavaScript. So here you see that we share that webinar recording on our blog. Here you can see that on our blog you have the webinar recording, and all the question and answers which will not get answered today, we will put those answers of those questions on the follow-up blog, which you can see here. anytime you can go to infragistics.com to explore all the offerings of our products. And if you have any question, you can send email to us as well. So that is infragistics.com. So I am done, guys. And now I'm going to take your question. And if your question is not getting answered, we will definitely try to answer them over the in the follow-up blog. Once again, thank you so much, guys, for joining in today. It was exciting, and I understand that custom directives are a very important topic, and there are a lot of discussion left in this, which probably will cover in upcoming webinar. Once again, thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. And I'm going to hang out here for 10 more minutes and try to answer your questions, guys. Thank you so much.